The kind of therapy that I do is called compassionate inquiry, and I mentioned it before, and it's studied by, right now by it's been studied by 2,500 people over 80 countries, and every year, 3 times a year, there's about 300, 400 people that sign up for it. And so if any of you are interested, you can check that out, compassionate inquiry. It's not easy to do or to study because it's very emotionally demanding, it's just challenging, and mostly because it requires that the therapist first look deeply in themselves, including all their unconscious stuff. So that's the method that I've helped to develop, and it's available both in a professional form and also in a form for people who are not therapists. It's a shorter version, much less expensive, not interactive, but it's available online. That's what I've developed. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other therapies. I don't think I have all the answers. I don't think anybody's got all the answers. So I think there are other wonderful therapies out there. I know that Ivana here has developed biosynthesis. From what it sounds like, it's very similar, at least in principle, to what I do, and it goes underneath the conscious mind. I quite agree with you that just dealing with people's thoughts and behaviors is completely insufficient. It may be helpful in some specific situations, but it's not all that sufficient for healing. And let me tell you a horror story. 4 years ago, I was in Norway speaking at a conference, and I was talking about addictions and trauma. At that conference, there was 2 other speakers, a very famous American psychiatrist, one of the psychiatrists who helped to write the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. So this man helped to write the Diagnostic Manual. The other person was an international, I won't mention names, was an internationally known leader in cognitive behavioral therapy. So the night before the conference, now naturally I knew about their work, but they didn't know anything about my work, which is okay. We had dinner, and I asked the psychiatrist, where do you live? And he said, I live in San Diego. I said, oh, you must know Dr. Vincent Felitti. Now, here's the thing. Dr. Vincent Felitti is he's an American physician, and he's the main investigator of what have become known as the Adverse Childhood Experiences Studies, the ACE studies. World famous. They've been published in dozens of medical journals, psychological journals, psychiatric journals. And these adverse childhood experiences studies showed that the more adversity, I should say the more trauma, a child has had, the greater the risk for addiction, the greater the risk for mental health problems, for venereal disease, for criminal behavior, for relationship problems, for physical illness like autoimmune disease. And these studies, as I say, had been published for a couple of decades. So I said to them, you must know Dr. Vincent Felitti, because they live in San Diego. And he said, no, who is he? I said, oh, well, he's the chief investigator of the Adverse Childhood Experiences Studies. This famous American psychiatrist and this famous leader in CBT said, what are those? They never heard of the most famous studies on trauma ever done. And that's the nature of CBT, I think. Now, some practitioners of CBT may be very good therapists, especially if they know how to form a good relationship with their clients. But I'm telling you, as a method, I don't think much about it, because it doesn't go, as you say, to the underlying issues. Now, as to what you said about the unconscious, if you actually look at how the brain develops physiologically, the part of the brain that develops first, this is true both in the evolutionary sense, but also in the individual developmental sense of a human being. The part of the brain that develops first is the emotional brain, not the intellectual brain. Which means, in practical terms, that the right side of the brain which is the one that's mostly more emotional and more holistic, develops well before the left side of the brain, which is the more intellectual side. Which means that a lot of the experiences that we hold are held in the unconscious part of our brains. So any therapy that ignores that is going to be limited, and any therapy that knows how to work with that is going to be that much more successful. Now, there isn't just one form of therapy. So in my compassionate inquiry, we do get to those unconscious, we have ways of getting to that unconscious material. Biosynthesis does, I'm sure. Neurocognitive therapies get there. Somatic experiencing therapies get there. Hypnosis can get there. Psychedelic work can get there. Certain kind of just working with the body can get there sometimes. But you're quite right, it's essential that we touch and open and help people understand their unconscious lives, not what they consciously think. Because before the baby knows how to think, they feel. And if their feeling lives are balanced, they'll think properly. But you can have people with brilliant minds who are emotionally disconnected, who are unconscious is shut down, and they'll be